I then realised that I had to learn a little bit more about the enemy, but the ground was pretty open at that particular spot from the rock onwards. So I left my platoon commanders behind and I crawled forward to a recce position where I could see the enemy position through my binoculars. I realised then that a left flanking assault was not really feasible. A centre assault wouldn't work because that was the route that John Kisley and his men had taken. So I decided that right flank would do a right flanking attack onto the enemy position. The problem was that I was the only person who knew where we were planning to go. I then returned, crawled back to my company headquarters area to be greeted by my forward observation officer who said, "Simon, I'm sorry, the guns can't fire. I don't know how long they're going to be offline for, and I don't know why they're unable to fire." I had an hour and a half of darkness left, but as everybody, to my knowledge at that stage, had attacked after artillery fire onto a position. And I thought, well, I can't use artillery fire now. So I've either got to wait for the artillery to come, and I don't know when they're going to come online, or I've got to attack without artillery. I decided that I would attack without artillery, and therefore I thought, right, if I'm going to attack without artillery, I must attack quickly. Well, a company attack normally takes about 40 or so minutes to go from start to when you actually start to attack. I gave myself 10 minutes. 2 minutes for my orders, for confirmatory orders, 2 minutes for the platoon commander's orders, 2 minutes for section commander's orders, and then a little bit of slippage time in between that. 10 minutes later, we were off, we were set, ready to go, and we fixed bayonets, ready to move round. But as I said, I was the only person who knew where to go, so I had to lead them. And that's not normal for a company commander to take a company round to a start position. Normally a platoon commander or somebody like that would do that. Anyway, so I led the company round, and we decided that because we weren't a particularly well-trained company, that we would revert to Guards Depot basic infantry tactics. And that was what we did. So everybody knew exactly what they had to do. I knelt down and the companies then spread out without any orders to their battle positions. I put my heavy machine guns on the right flank with my anti-tank weapons on the right flank, and the plan was that they would initiate the assault, and they would fire the anti-tank rounds would fire a round into the rocks, the machine guns would fire a burst, and we would charge up into the enemy position. I managed to get to within 15 meters of the enemy position without being seen, and that was my final assault position, only 15 meters away. So we ended up with some 60 odd men to attack 10 men of Argentinians. And I had an SAS company sergeant major who said that he'd never advanced through so many ricochets and tracer rounds and heaven knows what else as he did in that short 15-meter charge onto the enemy position. We arrived and we found that we had killed 3 Argentinians and we captured a further 4. So that resulted in us being taken a bite out of the final enemy position of the Argentinians on Tumbledown Mountain. Then one of my guardsmen Pengelly, who was a big, strong guardsman, a GPMG operator, decided that there was some enemy up on the top of the rocks that we'd just attacked. And he started to climb the mountain or the final rocks. And he was about halfway up when he was shot in the stomach by an Argentinian round. But we managed to keep him alive for 2.5 hours with basic first aid, even though he lost 1.5 feet of gut from the operation after back in the regimental aid post. Having taken a bite out of the enemy position, we then reverted to the plan, which was for 3 platoon under Robert Lawrence to move round to the left, round the mountain, and 2 platoon under Mark Matheson to continue on round the right of the mountain to take the rest of the mountain out. Robert Lawrence got to advanced about 15 or so metres before his platoon started to be fired on from the pinnacle of the rocks. And I realised that I'd made a mistake, that I hadn't organised troops to take that particular bunch of rocks out, partly because I hadn't known about them beforehand, and I'd missed that. So I looked around and to see who was available to take on the machine gun post that was up in the middle of the rocks. And Sergeant Jackson, who was the platoon sergeant of 3 platoon, I tasked him to take on that machine gun post. He looked around, saw that he was virtually by himself, took off his webbing, laid down his rifle, started to climb the rocks, and he posted a grenade into the machine gun post, which silenced that machine gun post. He then came back to where I was. Meanwhile, 3 platoons started to continue to move round to the left. Then, as they advanced, effectively being led by Robert Lawrence, they got another 15 or so metres before they were fired on by more enemy on the pinnacle of the rocks, but further back from where we'd initially were approaching from the west end. I saw my role as a company commander as one to step in when things went wrong. Things were going wrong with 3 platoon, they'd gone stationary, so I saw it as my task to try and sort it out. I looked around and saw that Sergeant Jackson was there, and Lance Sergeant Gregg was with me as my signaller, and we decided the 3 of us would move up a narrow 1.5, 2 foot ridge up to the pinnacle of the rocks, and the 3 of us did some fire movement up the rocks to the very top of the pinnacle of the rocks. There we came across a further machine gun post and 2 riflemen. We killed the machine gunner in his post and captured the 2 riflemen. I can't remember whether we captured them or whether they just surrendered. Anyway, we got them in the end. That secured the pinnacle of the rocks, and it was totally then clear, which enabled 3 platoon then to continue moving round to the north towards the end of the objective. Robert Lawrence played a significant role leading his platoon. The fighting broke down into pairs as we took on individual groups of Argentinian enemy. He came round a rock and he was shot in the head, where he lost about 1/3 of his head from an Argentinian round. We dragged him back into cover, where we then kept him alive for a couple of hours until we managed to get him evacuated by helicopter. But the effect of him being shot as a charismatic leader was that the platoon stopped, and I then had to step in again, but this time I called one platoon under Jamie Dalrymple to come forward and reinforce 3 platoon. One platoon would be my fire support platoon. And they then advanced through 3 platoon and cleared the rest of the mountain. Meanwhile, 2 platoon had cleared their element of the mountain. They had no problems, and so I wasn't involved in their attack. We were then nearing the end of night time, and it was beginning to get light, and so I went round the company position and laid out the GPMGs into a defensive all-round defence. Very luckily, just shortly after I'd completed that task, the enemy mounted a counterattack from the northwest, but because the machine guns were in place, they only got about 15 meters before they realized that attacking a mountain in daylight against machine guns was not an act of war, and they withdrew.